Chelsea didn't lose Eden Hazard in the way football fans usually understand loss. There was no sudden collapse, no single moment where everything stopped working. What happened instead was slower, almost invisible at first, like a system quietly shutting down in the background, while everyone kept pressing the same buttons, expecting different results. And that is where the misunderstanding begins. Eden Hazard was never just a winger. He was not simply a source of goals or assists, not even just a creative outlet on the left side. He was the gravitational force of an entire attacking structure. Every Chelsea possession in his prime bent toward him whether the ball was intended for him or not. And the strange part is that Chelsea only realized this after he left. What remains now is not a team missing a player. It is a team still searching for a role that no longer exists in the same form. And every new left-sided attacker who arrives at Stamford Bridge is measured against something that cannot be rebuilt with transfers alone. But here is the uncomfortable question that changes everything. What if the problem was never the replacements but the expectation itself? Because once you understand Hazard's role, you stop evaluating modern wingers in isolation. You start comparing them to a standard that reshaped the Premier League. And that is where everything begins to fall apart. To understand this properly, you have to go back to the feeling defenders had when Hazard picked up the ball. It was not fear in the traditional sense. It was anticipation mixed with inevitability. Once he isolated a fullback, the outcome was no longer a duel. It was a countdown. He didn't dribble to escape pressure, he dribbled to attract it. And that is the difference most modern analysis misses. Statistically, Hazard's output was elite. Roughly 85 Premier League goals, over 50 assists, and consistently among the most fouled players in the league across multiple seasons. In fact, over his Chelsea career, he suffered more than 600 fouls in the Premier League alone, placing him among the most targeted attackers in English football history. But numbers still fail to explain his true value. The real impact was not in what he did after receiving the ball. It was in what the defense did before he even moved. Every defender shifted slightly closer. Every midfield line bent a few meters deeper. Every second ball phase became cautious because Hazard did not require space to become dangerous. He created danger inside crowded areas, where modern wingers begin to struggle in comparison. Because today's wide attackers are often trained to avoid contact, to preserve possession, to recycle play when the situation becomes unstable. But Hazard's football was the opposite of preservation. It was controlled instability, and that is why, even when he lost the ball, it rarely felt like a mistake. It felt like part of the attack continuing in another dimension. But here is where the contrast becomes sharper. Players like Lamine Yamal lose the ball frequently too, roughly similar volumes in high-involvement games. Yet the perception is completely different. Because Yamal's losses often occur while attempting to break structured defensive lines, not avoid them. His mistakes are forward-facing, aggressive, intentional. Meanwhile, Garnacho loses the ball, the reaction is different. It feels less like an experiment and more like an interruption. The action resets rather than evolves. And that distinction defines modern winger evaluation more than any single statistics. But here is where the deeper problem begins. Because Chelsea did not replace Hazard with one player, they replaced him with a sequence of attempts. Each one exposed a different layer of the same issue. After Hazard's departure, Chelsea entered a phase of experimentation that looked like recruitment, but functioned more like uncertainty. Players arrived with different profiles, different strengths, different price tags, but none of them were tasked with doing exactly what Hazard did, because nobody could define what that actually meant anymore. Christian Pulisic brought acceleration and directness. Moments of brilliance existed, especially in transition, but the consistency of controlling entire defensive structures was absent. Injuries interrupted rhythm, and rhythm is everything for wide attackers who rely on timing rather than isolation. Sterling arrived with proven Premier League pedigree, high output expectations, and tactical discipline. But at Chelsea, the role shifted. Instead of being the focal destabilizer, he became one of many moving parts. The clarity of role disappeared, and with it, the sharpness of decision-making in final third moments. Then came Mykhailo Mudryk, a profile defined almost entirely by raw acceleration and potential. but acceleration without structured decision pathways creates inconsistency. And in the Premier League, inconsistency is quickly punished, not always by defenders, but by the system itself. Because Premier League defensive structures do not reward indecision. They compress space faster than almost any league in world football. And that is where Chelsea's left-wing problem becomes systemic. It is not about talent, but about clarity. At Hazard's peak, Chelsea's left side was not simply an attacking channel. It was a controlled zone of unpredictability. Opponents knew where the ball would go. They just could not stop it once it arrived. Midfielders adjusted their positioning toward him. Fullbacks hesitated between containment and engagement. Centre-backs shifted slightly wider to cover his inside drift. Even goalkeepers adjusted near-post anticipation patterns because Hazard's finishing angles were unconventional but consistent. That level of influence does not appear in basic statistics, but it shows up in something more important: team structure deformation. After Hazard left, that deformation disappeared, and Chelsea's attack became symmetrical again, predictable again, balanced again. Which sounds positive on paper, but in practice, it meant something else entirely. It meant no single player was forcing the opponent to break shape, and without that pressure, attacking systems begin to rely on combinations rather than individuals. Combinations are efficient, but they are also easier to defend when structured properly. That is why Chelsea's left wing stopped being decisive, not because the players became worse, but because the role became smaller. Then came a shift that briefly changed the narrative. Cole Palmer did not arrive as a traditional left winger. He arrived as a flexible attacking hub. But what made him different was not position, it was permission. Permission to drift, permission to slow the game, permission to take responsibility in decisive zones. And suddenly, Chelsea had a player who was not restricted by the left wing role, but was allowed to interpret it dynamically. His output reflected that freedom. Goals, assists, penalties under pressure, late-game decisive moments, not in the same stylistic form as Hazard, but functionally similar in one key way. He influenced games directly rather than indirectly. And this is where the comparison becomes interesting. Because Chelsea did not suddenly rediscover Hazard, they rediscovered the concept of central attacking gravity being applied from a wide starting position. But here is the warning hidden inside that success. If the system relies on one player to recreate structural imbalance, then the system is still fragile. And fragility is exactly what defines modern Chelsea winger history. Because after every promising phase comes regression. After every adaptation comes another tactical shift. After every manager, another interpretation of what the left wing should be. There is no continuity, only reinterpretation. And that is why players like Sterling, Mudryk, Pulisic, and others all appear inconsistent in the same environment where they were previously considered dangerous. It is not coincidence, but a structural instability. Now contrast this with the Premier League at large. Modern elite wingers like Yamal, or even emerging profiles in Europe, are not judged purely by goals or assists anymore. They are judged by progression metrics, dual success in tight spaces, expected threat creation, and, most importantly, resistance to defensive collapse. But Hazard operated before that analytical framework fully matured. He was not optimized, but unleashed. And that is why his legacy feels increasingly unmatchable in hindsight. Because modern football is moving toward control systems, Hazard represented controlled chaos. And those two philosophies rarely coexist in the same tactical era. This brings us back to the original comparison. Garnacho looks raw next to Yamal not because he lacks talent, but because his decision architecture is still developing under pressure constraints. Yamal already operates with a level of spatial awareness that allows him to lose the ball forward, meaningfully, in dangerous zones. Hazard, however, existed in a different category entirely. He did not simply lose or retain possession. He manipulated defensive attention until possession itself became secondary. That is why even his mistakes felt productive. And that is why Chelsea still feel his absence years later. Because the final truth is not about players, but design. Chelsea stopped designing around a left winger who defines matches, and started cycling through players who fit into predefined systems. But systems, no matter how well built, still require a destabilizing force. And without that force, even the most talented attackers begin to look ordinary under pressure. And so the question returns, sharper than before, not who replaces Hazard, but whether modern football even allows another player like him to exist in the same form again. If it doesn't, then Chelsea's problem was never recruitment, but evolution itself.